This week's Piltch Point with Avram Piltch is proudly powered by Monster Products. The headphones on my head right now, the Monster Elements, available in on-ear and over-ear. They are by far my favorite headphones I've ever owned, but they're not for everybody. There are also other styles, smaller versions, in-ear, small sports style, Bluetooth, corded, and of course speakers. Everything from the little tiny hotshot to the big monster blaster, whose review went up today. And of course all the cables to connect these and your computer and all of your other devices, and power as well, available by going to f5live.tv/monster. And that music means that it is time for the Piltch Point with online editorial director of Laptop Magazine and Tom's Guide, Avram Piltch. Abram!
Hey!
Intel! It's been a big week.
It's been a big week. So, for those who are not keep track every year, last few years around this time, late August, September, Intel announces a refresh to their CPU line, and they always give it something Gen core. So now we're on the 8th gen, 8th gen core. What does that mean for those who don't know? It means they've taken last year's CPU, the CPUs that are in all the laptops now and pretty much all the new desktops, new ones made, they're replacing them with newer ones that are a little bit faster, or maybe a lot faster, but they start slow. So right now they're coming out with 4 CPUs, and they're only going to be for mainstream consumer laptops. So these are what are called U-series processor, Core i5 and Core i7 processors. So the ones that you see in most laptops, except for gaming laptops and workstations, which have H series processors. And then the really thin 2-in-1s that have Y series, that's not being refreshed yet. Now, all these things are going to be refreshed. Business notebooks, not until January, because probably not until January, they didn't say exactly, because they don't come out with those at the same time. So you're going to see when Intel refreshes their CPU, almost immediately, most of the major PC manufacturers announce that they're refreshing their laptop lines. So, we would expect the IFA show is coming up this week, and we would expect to see major refresh announcements from, all the big PC vendors. Obviously, Apple doesn't march to the beat of its own drummer, so I wouldn't expect to see MacBooks updated probably till next spring. And Microsoft also kind of operates on its own schedule.
That's for
sure. So I wouldn't expect to see any of the Surfaces updated soon, unless they decide to update the Surface Book, because it's been like 2 years already since they've updated it. So there's that. But should you or should you not wait for this? Well, if you are considering buying one of the consumer notebooks that would have a U-series processor, which is basically most Core i5 and Core i7 notebooks, you should seriously consider waiting for the 8th gen core, where laptops with them will probably be out within 1 to 2 months. Why should you wait? Because for the first time with 8th gen core, you're getting quad-core processor. You're getting a quad-core processor in a mainstream consumer notebook. Like, up until now, you've had to buy either a more expensive gaming notebook or some type of a workstation notebook to get 4 cores. Having 4 cores means you're going to have better multitasking, and everyone's multitasking. It doesn't matter whether you have one window open. You've got a lot of stuff running in the background. So it's going to run 4 cores and 8 threads, which means like 8 different tasks at a time. And that's really going to improve performance. So with that, and with some other architectural sort of behind the scenes things Intel has done, Intel claims that their chip, the new chips, are going to be 40% faster than last year's. Obviously, depending on what task. Now we haven't gotten to test them yet, so we can't say with absolute certainty that they perform significant that much better. But going from dual core to going to quad core seems like a pretty big leap. Now there's some controversy here that and if you're not a big and if you've not been following Intel processors for a few years, if it's then this won't matter to you. But all the processors have a kind of, besides being 6th gen core, 7th gen core, 8th gen core, they all have like a code name, right, for what the architecture, the design inside of the chip is. So the 7th gen core, last year's model, was called Kaby Lake. This year's 8th gen core, the first group of them are going to be called, guess what? Kaby Lake Refresh. Now, so they've just made a slight change. Now, everybody knows, because the people who follow the industry know what sort of Intel's next few generations are codenamed. Everyone was expecting a completely new architecture called Coffee Lake, and then another one called Cannon Lake after that. And Cannon Lake is highly anticipated because Cannon Lake is going to take the size of the die for the processor and shrink it down from 14 to 10 nanometers. And when you do that, you improve the amount of performance you can get because you're basically generating less heat and using less power to do the same thing. So everyone's been waiting for this die shrink to get from 14 nanometers, which we've had for like the last 3 years or so, down to 10. Now, what's confusing is when that comes out, it's still going to be called 8th gen core. So Intel is calling Kaby Lake Refresh 8th gen core. They're going to call Coffee Lake, which is still 14 nanometers, but is a new architecture, 8th gen core. And they're going to call Cannon Lake, the new long anticipated 10 nanometer processor, also 8th gen core. So all 3 different architectures are going to have the same brand name. Right now, the only one that's coming out, those 4 chips, are Kaby Lake Refresh. But over time, they plan to use the same brand name for several different types of chip, which could be very confusing for users.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I imagine that they will, that like, obviously the model numbers themselves, like for example, sitting in front of me, I've got a Surface Book, and it's got a 6600U, which lets us know a couple of things. 6th gen U series, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
But it also lets us know that with the 66, that it's of a certain spec. If you're really looking,
no,
you'll be able to tell, right?
Listen, I mean, if you, first of all, there are many ways you'll be able to tell if you know to look. So in fairness, like my colleague Andrew Friedman wrote an article about how this is confusing. In fairness, if you're geeky enough to care, you're probably geeky enough to look it up and find out. There's a lovely website that everyone should know about called arc.intel.com, where you can plug in the name of any processor that Intel has ever made, and it will, or is making now, and it will tell you all the specs about that processor. Ooh. What year it came out, how many nanometers it is, like whether it supports vPro management or not, like how many cores it has, maximum clocks, like all the little details about every processor. So if there's ever a question about like if you get the model number of a processor, there's no doubt you can get all the details if you want to go online and go to arc.intel.com or somewhere else, probably on Wikipedia too. But for the person looking, looking at the sticker on it or reading the spec sheet, they may not necessarily be aware of all these differences, and you know, we'd like things to be a little bit more transparent to the reader, to the person reading the spec sheet or whatever. However, that gives you even more reason to go to laptopmag.com and other sites that do reviews, because we will inform you when these things happen, and how well the processors work, which is really the bottom line of what you care about. Like, am I getting good battery life? Am I getting good performance? That's what you really care about. And could I be getting better performance with something else? So bottom line, I'm really, really interested to see how these 8th gen core processors perform. I would be really interested to see whether they have a negative impact on battery life, which would offset any performance gains because you really want good battery life. Intel has been kind of cagey about the battery life. They've said these systems will get many of them will get up to 10 hours or something, which is not great, because there are a lot of systems that get over 10 hours, but I think they're maybe softballing it. Ultimately, it comes down to how big is the battery in the laptop, which Intel has no control over, how much does the screen use up, all that stuff. But if you had two different computers that were otherwise the same, one with 7th gen and one with 8th gen, would the battery life be the same, or would 8th gen be better, or would 8th gen be worse? My guess would be the best that we can hope for is the same, because you're doubling the number of cores. So it's hard to believe that it would actually do better.
Fair enough.
But, we'll see. So to make a long story short, if you're considering buying a consumer PC laptop now, something that would have a Core i5 or Core i7, is not a gaming notebook or a workstation or a business laptop. Your standard, Dell Inspiron, Lenovo IdeaPad type of HP Pavilion, Spectre, whatever type of laptop, those types of laptop, just mainstream consumer laptops, I would consider waiting to see if the laptop that you have your eye on is going to be refreshed in the next couple of months.
Sure.
Now, if you're spending under $500, don't worry about it, because they're not replacing Core i3, and they're not replacing Pentium or Celeron processors, the processors that you usually see in sub $500 laptops.
Oh, okay.
So those aren't getting replaced anytime soon. So basically, it's a little bit of a narrow band. Only Core i5 and Core i7 U series laptops are getting refreshed in the next couple months, but those are some of the most popular ones. So
as I said, it's the one that's sitting in front of me is the i7U. So
right, exactly.
That shows its popularity, that there just happens to be one of the processors we're talking about sitting here on the desk.
Most of the laptops that we review in a year, I wouldn't say all, I wouldn't say it's like 70 or 80%, but like the maybe more than 50% of the ones we review in a given year would fall into this category.
Gotcha. And do we know anything about the i3, or is it just it'll happen at some point? Yes,
at some point.
Okay.
I mean,
that's all the information we have.
Yeah, no, that's all. Like Intel has been very cagey about when they're going to release other stuff. My guess is they did say something about, well, we plan to make an announcement about desktop chips sometime this fall. But since they didn't say we plan to make an announcement about Core i3, or we plan to make an announcement about Celeron and Pentium, or we plan to make an announcement about the H series or the business versions of the U series, my expectation is CES. Gotcha. Because that's what it's been the last few years.
Yeah.
Right? The last few years, Intel's done exactly this. They've released the mainstream consumer U series ones in September, and then they've released most of the other ones in January. So my guess is, if you're thinking about a gaming notebook or a business notebook or a workstation, which I guess would be a business notebook too, or a budget notebook, unless you really want to wait like 6 months, because January's not 6 months away, but if they're announcing the chip in January, your favorite computer probably won't be the computer that you were thinking of getting probably won't actually hit the shelf till February or March.
Right.
So, um, so just some food for thought as you're planning out your purchase, if you are planning a purchase or thinking about, hey, should I get a new laptop next year? Yeah, this may be a good opportunity.
Sure. Well, as always, Avram, definitely appreciate the information, details that obviously I don't but I'm not necessarily able to keep up on. I knew that Intel announced stuff. I read I read Andrew Friedman's article, but even there, I'm just not able to hold all of it in my head, and I'm glad that you are.
It's one of the few things that I can hold.
Well, we always appreciate you bringing those details to us.
Always a pleasure. So if you want to read more about Intel HN Core or about laptops in general, I certainly recommend you go to laptopmag.com, where we have all this information along with reviews of all the best laptops today. Oh, and the worst ones too. But we have a best list of the best ones.
I guess a worst list is pretty important too.
No, we don't have a worst list. But
okay.
You review. Our goal is to review everything. So,
sure.
If we only reviewed things that we thought would be good, then we wouldn't be doing a good service.
Absolutely.
So we have lists of the best ones, but if you look through our raw list of reviews, you'll also see some of the worst ones, because there's no good without bad.
Absolutely. Because like we've always said, without the bad, we don't have a place in the industry.
Yes.
All right. Well.
So thank you, Intel, for confusing people with this branding, because they'll need to read my articles.
There you go. And definitely do that. Definitely read the articles.